want to throw this out there today, and let's just start with this question. When did hobbies start needing outcome? Like really, when did just for fun quietly turn into, okay, but what's the result? Where is this getting me? How can my progress be measured? When did making something for yourself start feeling a little too indulgent at times, or even a little wasteful? I've been thinking about this lately because I don't think it all happened at once. I think it kind of crept into our society slowly. So slowly that we barely noticed it happening. Hey, sweet friend, and welcome to the Loose Threads and Stitches podcast. I'm your host, Kristen, with I See Stars Quilting. I'm a quilter, encourager, lover of all things cozy, and today we're settling into a conversation, and I think this is going to meet you right where you are. We are continuing the Enough chapter, this little series where we've been gently pulling apart the pressure to always be more productive, more efficient, more impressive. We've talked about moving targets. We've talked about overload. We've talked about the stories that we carry. And today we're talking about something that feels really tender to me. The difference between productivity and play. If this podcast has been a soft spot in your week, it would mean the world to me if you popped over to Spotify or Apple Podcast and left a quick 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, say hi to me in the comments. I love hearing from you. Okay, so first, let's ground this. Productivity is not bad. I know I like to think of myself as a productivity queen often, okay? I love productivity. I love to measure things. I love to see the time and the productivity increase in the right ways and for things to be more efficient. It's not the enemy. Productivity builds businesses. It keeps our homes running. It helps ideas actually become something real. I love it. I love productivity when it stays in its lane. Okay, but here's what I've been noticing. Productivity doesn't really stay in its lane anymore. It kind of spreads. It leaks into places that it didn't used to live, like hobbies, friendships, rest, even the way that we take care of ourselves. We track our sleep, we optimize our workouts, we measure our steps, we even analyze our journaling. And slowly, without realizing it, the question shifts from, did I enjoy that, to did I actually do anything? And that shift, it's very small. It is so small, and it's almost unnoticeable, but it changes everything. Because enjoyment and accomplishment are not the same experience. And then there's this second layer, the performance layer. You know what I mean? You sit down to make something, and almost immediately there's another voice. Should I post this? Should I film this? Should I turn this into content? This is all from me, by the way. This may not be where you live in your life, but this is all from me. Okay. Could this be a product? Could this be something more? Should I sell the things that I make? Should I rent a craft show booth? And listen, none of this is wrong. Sharing is beautiful. Building something is beautiful. Growing something is beautiful. But when every creative act becomes something that we present to the world and something that we expect ourselves to have to show off, it stops being a refuge. And it becomes output. And output invites evaluation. Evaluation invites comparison. And a comparison brings back that moving target right back into the room. All right, let me say that again, just so you can follow along here, okay? When you tell yourself that everything you create has to be shared, it stops being a refuge. It becomes output. Output invites evaluation from the rest of the world. Whenever you put yourself out there, people are going to have opinions. Whether you care what their opinions are or not, they're going to have opinions. And evaluation invites comparison. And comparison brings back that moving target that we talked about a few weeks ago right back into the room. And suddenly something that used to feel very safe, which was just you in your home sitting there hand sewing some pieces of scrap fabric together, feels very exposed. And it feels like it's something that you can easily compare yourself to other people, and other artists can compare themselves to you. Okay. It doesn't even have to be about art. It could be about anything. But this is where we're talking about just in the hobby world today. So I had this moment recently, and I was working with something very simple, nothing fancy, nothing groundbreaking. I was just stitching, and I caught myself thinking, is this something that I should share on Instagram? Or is this something that I should make a video about on YouTube? And I paused because that question felt very off, like at the center of me. Okay. It felt very off. It wasn't it wasn't any longer about, is this worth doing? Am I enjoying this? Am I having a good time with this? It became, is this worth showing other people? Now, I am very comfortable in myself as an artist. I often share the mistakes that I make while I'm making projects, because I think that, you can learn a lot from somebody else's mistakes. And I really don't mind sharing my mistakes. But I just sat there for a second, because that is a very different standard. Okay. That's not about connection. That's about visibility. And I gently pulled myself back, and that project that I was working on, I really tried to reframe myself and say, I'm creating this just for me. I didn't film it. I didn't photograph it. Nobody is going to ever see it. It's not because it wasn't good or something that I felt ashamed of. I wanted something that was just for me. So I just kept stitching. I kept sewing. And the energy around that project felt a lot quieter, but it also felt more honest while I was making it. Okay. And it really did help me in that moment to reframe why I was creating in the first place, because I definitely don't expect to become famous or to ever make any outrageous amount of money or anything from what I do. I simply love to create, and I simply love to share it with other artists and to talk about it with other quilters and other artists. And I love the friendships that I have made from doing that. Okay. But I needed something that was just for myself as well. So we're going to shift this just a little bit now, and let's talk about play for a second, because play isn't fluff. It's not extra. It's actually essential. Play regulates your nervous system. It tells your brain that you are safe here. There's no scoreboard. There's no evaluation. There's no pressure, just curiosity. And here's something that I really love. Curiosity and shame cannot exist at the same time. You cannot be deeply curious and deeply self-critical in the exact same moment. Okay? Because you have to, when you are curious, you have to admit there are things that you don't understand, you don't know, and you want to know. Okay? Play invites experimentation. And experimentation really lowers the stakes. So when those stakes are lower, your body relaxes. And in a world that is constantly measuring you, play creates a pocket where measurement disappears. And it's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's very powerful little pocket in this world where you can just not expect to be measured, not be held to certain standards, but just experiment. And I often tell people, people will ask me, Kristen, I really want to sew this pattern that has curves. And I'd be like, that's amazing. Have you ever sewn curves before? And they'll be like, no, I haven't. It's been very scary for me. So, okay, well, before we go and buy 5 different yards of your very, very best favorite fabrics and stuff, let's take some scrap fabric and let's pull out some template from the internet or whatever, and let's try one and let's see how it goes. right? You're not married to that scrap fabric. You're not expecting to make a masterpiece out of this one weird block that you're making. You're just trying it out. You're just playing with it. There is no pressure to get it perfect. And, that's practice. Okay. And that helps a lot when people have very intimidating blocks. And honestly, that's how I end up with orphan blocks. Okay. Sometimes you think that would be so pretty. And then you decide, you know what? It's not quite as fun as I thought it was going to be. I think I will just put that on the back burner for maybe next year or another time. Right. So when I sit down with fabric and I already know I'm not going to document this quilt, I'm not going to try and teach the world how I made this magical discovery or whatever. I think a lot of things change, and I like to kind of keep those things to myself. When there's not that pressure around you, you can feel your shoulders drop. I know that my breathing slows down, my brain gets quieter, and it's not necessarily all about the outcome of the quilt. It's about the rhythm, the repetition, the hum of the sewing machine, the feeling of fabric moving underneath my hands. There is no next level have to perform moment in there, right? There's no upgrade, no strategy. It's just presence, and presence feels like enough. And that is where I feel most like myself. So the question becomes in this whole episode, the question becomes, how do we get back to that? And I don't think the answer is to quit everything productive. Okay. I don't think it's an all or nothing thing. I think it's so much smaller than that. I think it's so much softer than that. And I think it looks like protecting one corner of your life, just one, where nothing has to become anything, where nobody else needs to see it, where it doesn't need to grow in order for you to feel successful or scale or improve. It just gets to exist. So maybe it's a small project, or maybe it's practicing sketching flowers in your garden, or maybe it's a quilt that never gets posted, or it's one of those projects that just lasts forever because it's a very, very detailed postage stamp type quilt where it's tiny and it takes long times, but it brings you joy. Okay. Maybe it's just something that stays completely yours, not hidden out of fear, but protected out of care and love for yourself. So here's what I want to leave you with today. Is there something in your life that used to be entirely play, but it quietly became a performance or something that you measure yourself by? And if there is, I want to ask, what would it look like to take just a tiny piece of it back? Not perfectly. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, like we said. Not permanently either. Just intentionally holding part of it back just for yourself so that you keep that joy inside. Play, it doesn't need proof. It doesn't need results. It doesn't need an audience. You are allowed to make something that earns nothing. You are allowed to have a craft that you don't have to turn into a business. Okay. If you really want to turn it into a business, we can have a whole other podcast episode on that. I have lots of things to say about that. Yeah, that's for an entire different day. Okay. But, you are allowed to enjoy something without upgrading it. You are allowed to let something be enough simply because it brings you joy. And that's the only reason that you need. Not everything in your life needs to become something more. Some things are allowed to stay small and quiet and just yours. You don't have to share them with the world or share them with, everybody at your quilting circle or anything. And honestly, I think that that's where a lot of the healing lives in this world. It's quite a beautiful piece, right? It's quite a beautiful piece to have something protected that is just yours in this world. I am so glad that we spent this time together today. If this episode felt like a fresh breath of air. Don't forget to follow the show and leave a quick review. I will meet you back here next week for another episode of the Enough chapter. We're kind of getting close to the end here, wrapping it up. My name is Kristen with ICStarsQuilting.com, and you've been listening to the Loose Threads and Stitches podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.